Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unscripted Coding. For those of you who are new to the channel, Unscripted Coding is where we just start tackling a project without a lot of foresight, and it's filled with mistakes and all of the problems that come with development. Today we have a pretty simple goal in mind, but there's 1,000 different paths to get to it. I just want to spin up a Django website, which we're going to do nothing with. You just see the rocket ship. It's just the standard web page you see right after deploying it. And I want to bring it to a live website. I want to put it into production. Now, Django is a web framework that's written in Python. So I love it a lot. If you're building something more complicated than a one-page app, Django is a really good way to start. It already has some baked-in code for logins and user authentication. There's stuff on database management. So if you want to use MySQL, SQLite in the background, Django has really good frameworks already set up for that. And finally, you have all of these niceties about how you route your URLs, how you handle security. All of those things are already baked in for you. And so if you want to build a reasonably big, complex website, Django is a really, really good way to start. Now, since Django is just a framework, you can deploy it however you want to production. You run it locally while you build it, but once you get a good-looking website, presumably you want to put it up on the web. And the traditional way of doing that is getting a server together, paying the 10 to thousands of dollars a month to run a server. Serverless is what I'm all about lately. It is cheap. It's great for minor projects because all of the downsides of it are fine for small hobby projects. So while I'd like to push my next project up live, it's not revenue generating. It's not a big business, so I don't want to have to pay $10, $20, $30 a month to keep this running. So I'm going to go serverless, and in the past, what I've used is this script called Zappa. It's just a couple of lines. You would just go pip install Zappa, and then you would init and deploy. You fill out a few selections where you want to host it, what your username and password is, things like that. And it just goes straight up on AWS Lambda. And that has been fantastic because Lambda costs pennies a month on a not all that popular website. So that was a really good solution, but it hasn't been updated in the last little while. I feel like the progress on this has started to get abandoned. But the other thing is I don't actually know what is going on here. So I want to do something a little more manual. I want to go through that process a bit more to make sure we have control and we know what we're doing. Finally, the other pieces is it's not just getting Django up on a serverless stack, but you also got to figure out the other pieces. So I want to make sure that we got good storage available. So Azure Blob Storage is probably what I'm going to use. And I'm also going to try out that Azure serverless SQL database that we looked at a few episodes ago. But in short, I want to make sure everything's up, available online, but on the cheap. So hopefully, less than $1 a month to have the right storage, the right SQL databases, and the right server to keep this going. So I'm going to start by launching off a basic Django website, and then we're going to try and navigate through and get this all up on Azure. Okay, so we had a very simple task here that gave us the default Django page. And basically, that's all we're trying to put up online. Obviously, you don't want a basic default page. You want to start building into it. And we'll probably have projects in the future related to Django. But for now, the goal is just to take this page, put it up on a mostly, if not all, serverless stack so that friends and family can take a look at it. What we did was just run through a virtual environment, always a good idea. Pip install Django and start a project. To give you guys just a bit of context here, I've been working on a hobby project of my own, and it's called Project Breeze. I started off with minimum viable product. What is the simplest way I can achieve what I want to do? And I have the single page website here. The next step was to start having multiple tabs. Like, this is cool as a demo, this is cool as a landing page, but over time, we'll want different tabs to do different things, and we'll want to let people log in. And so a single page website is really easy. You can quite literally host it on Dropbox, a public folder. But once you start getting multiple pages, say linking a home page, an about page, a contact page, and of course trying to get more sophisticated features like logging in, users interacting, submitting, and retrieving materials, that starts to get much more difficult to do in just plain old JavaScript, or even if you use some other framework. So Django's the way to go, and we're going to move towards that. Okay, so that was frustrating. If you followed this through and you kind of followed every bit of it that I was speeding through, I've restarted this project multiple times trying to see if it was because I have the wrong version of Python, if I had some settings wrong in Azure, if I picked up the wrong version of Django, something that prevented this page from showing up on the live website. And it turns out in the very end, it's just this one configuration, the startup command over here in the configuration section here. So what is it? Well, Azure, well, let's go through this really quickly. What we did was we ran through the basic Django commands. We started a new project, we migrated, and we have that basic templated project. You see the rocket ship. And then we pushed it into GitHub, so into some sort of repository. You can use Bitbucket, you can use Azure repos, whatever you want, but I'm using GitHub. And then finally, you start this web app on Microsoft Azure. And with the deployment center, you can set it up so that it picks up any changes you push to your GitHub repository. And so it will pick that up, it'll package it all up, and then it'll push it to the live website. So in theory, it's very simple. And hopefully in the future, it's going to work really, really well. So this is the default site, obviously. And if I make some minor changes, the moment I push it up to GitHub, Azure is going to pick it up, and then it's going to start packaging and getting it ready for the live site. Takes probably a couple minutes, but that's as close to instant as we'd like. So that's going to be really cool. But where I was frustrated was, of course, we didn't see this page for a long time. We kept seeing that default Azure page that says, hey, upload something, get started. And the problem is here. So this is our root directory, and you'll have the requirements.txt, you have a couple folders, but what's missing is what Azure is looking for, which is this wsgi.py file. They're looking for that to signal, hey, this is a Django project, do what you do with Django stuff. It really puzzles me because none of the tutorials that I was looking at mentioned anything about it. And so they all just said, get it ready, and then Azure will automatically recognize it. And I don't know if Azure got dumber or if they're missing a piece in their tutorial or something along those lines. But like, Django doesn't default put this onto the root. It is in your project, into your app, and here. It's not like I custom changed anything to put it and hide it in a number of folders. But regardless, the solution was to go into here, the startup command. So in your web app, you go into configuration, and then you have your startup command. We have these other things which we leave untouched, but chdir, I think that's change directory, I'm not sure, will tell it it's not in the root. You need to go into your project, and then the app, and then the WSGI file. In this case, I've poorly named my app and project to be the same thing, but similarly, you would just put this, your project name, your app name. So most of the tutorials, you'll have your Django site, and then the app name is polls, for example, or blog, or whatever tutorial you're following. So just take this, put it right into startup command, and it should work. And it's working for me right now. Here's the rocket ship. So what are our next steps? Well, Django, putting it up here is nice, but the configuration here is, I don't think it's a configuration, but whatever our quota or plan is limited to 1 gig of space. If we were doing something short and simple, that's probably enough. But if you're doing a live site, just a handful of images, maybe a video, if you have something on your homepage, that reaching a gig is not really that difficult. So what we want to do is connect this Django page right here into Azure Blob Storage. So you have a cheap source of storage. You store all of your, say, JavaScript files, your images, your videos, icons, whatever takes up space, put it all onto Azure Blob, and then we're going to be able to connect the two. So Django, well, not Django, but there are libraries to handle that. The other piece is, of course, the database. Currently, we're running a local SQLite database. So over here, here's the root. In your project, you have an SQLite 3 file. That I don't think will even work here. Don't quote me, but I think there's going to be problems if you stick to the local SQLite file. You want to connect to an online hosted database. So I'm looking again to Azure. Azure has a wonderful serverless database, which will make it very cheap for you to host. While I was struggling, I also found this amazing guide from Anthony Shaw, Django on Azure Beyond Hello World. We're not going to go in that kind of depth, but I'm going to leave a link on my description because I think this is absolutely fantastic. So it follows a lot of the same steps we did, and has that automatic deployment, but it's starting to get really production ready. So if you are getting to the point where you have a lot of users, you don't want interruptions, you don't want bugs showing up for live users, and say you put a typo, you push it out. I do this all the time. I have a typo, I'm excited, I push it onto GitHub, it automatically triggers Azure, posts up on the website. I realize that there's a typo. Minutes later, I re-push it back out. Everything's fine. There's a span of 3 or 4 minutes where there was a typo on my website. I don't really care about that personally, even if there's a bug. But if you're doing a live production, real customers, real money, even if not a lot of customers, that's not really professional. That's not good habits. These guys, Anthony Shaw has described really good practices on how to do this. They suggest a testing environment, a development environment, and a production and staging. What is the SparkNotes version of that? In short, it means you start developing, you start adding new features, you have your testing tools, you run through that, you're meant to have bugs there. When it's fixed, you go into, you probably are working in your development environment where you have bugs. After you polish it, you move it into staging. What that means is it's not quite live, but it's ready, it's staging, getting ready. Somebody should take a look at it, review it, and then over time, it moves into production. It moves into your live website. So you get these stages. He has all sorts of great tips on cleaning up, doing secure practices as well, say environment variables. So you don't want your passwords, your keys in, say, GitHub, which is absolutely true. Anyways, that was a long sort of tangent. What I'm saying is you have all these tutorials on how to build Django. That's step one. You have it on your local computer. I think that's great. The next step is what we're doing here. You have kind of a live website that's good to show friends and family. You don't have a perfectly secure environment. You don't have great practices. But, if you're showing it to friends, if you're showing it even to potential customers at the dozens, maybe even hundreds, that's fine. But once you want to get really professional, you should take a link. You should take a look at the link that I leave in my description because it's really fantastic. Anyways, I am going to move on to next bits, and hopefully it's a little less frustrating than trying to get this up and running. Okay, I'm starting to feel pretty comfortable with what we've done. We have everything more or less working at this point, but I wanted to highlight a few things. I had to move a number of screens off to the side so that I can put in passwords, keys, things like that. I want to explain what is happening in all of those pieces. So you will find here my settings file. We have put in, of course, secret key, a debug value, database kind of information, and storage information. Those are all, you can put them as plain text right into the settings file. That's really bad practice, but to get this started, of course, that is an easy way to put these passwords and so on. And you'll have it running just fine. Oh, let me just commit that, push that out so that we get the latest version. Anyways, where I was going is that what you want to do is remove it. And one of the early problems I had is that I had this secrets file, which is like mildly better, but not great, to hide away some of your passwords. It's something I do at a really early stage, but immediately that set off problems online. We had that error page that showed up. And basically, it's incredibly dumb of me, and it took a long time to figure out what it was. But basically, the secrets file is something that's on my computer that I've added to the git ignore so that it doesn't go into the repository. That makes a lot of sense. But what that means is, of course, Microsoft Azure can't see it. So all of my passwords weren't working, and Azure's just has no access to anything. That's why the error popped up. So now instead, we have started using environment variables. This is something where you put into Azure, they store it, and every time they kind of run up this instance, they'll have all of these values. So let's pick one that's not so sensitive. The database driver. Okay. That's actually an interesting point. That was where our last error showed up. But what I want to say is that, you can put these up on Microsoft Azure. They'll have all these values, and they'll just substitute it. So that's why we have this OS environment get. They get the environment variables. This one's called Azure Static Container. Here, you have a default value. So if you don't get anything from the OS environment, you use the second value. It's actually really quite useful because on my environment, I'd want something like the debug value to be false. But when I'm running it here on my computer locally, then I might want to use true. And so this is a way for you to differentiate as well. So if you want to test locally, you may use a different database, you may use a different storage mechanism. So that's really useful. Where it's been particularly useful is the ODBC driver. If you have eagle eyes, you'll notice that I had a bit of trouble, and this number is different from what I revealed over here. So on my computer, my driver is version 13. That is also the version that Azure SQL suggests that you use. But interestingly enough, App Service doesn't have 13. It runs 17. So when I put in 13, it threw out errors saying, it doesn't have the driver. So you had to bump it up to 17. There's really no need for my local computer to need to upgrade to 17. So I will just stick with 13 until I have a good reason otherwise. anyways, that's basically where I want to get to. We have put in a few really simple views. Here we have the random image view. I'm not going to go through like all of the mechanics in Django, and I am happy to admit it's rusty, so I was Googling all sorts of tutorials. But random image goes to our static folder, into our static folder. So this is the root. We go into Project Breeze. This is our project, and then our project default app. And then in the static folder, I've put in this kind of green icon. When you run Python manage.py collect static, it collects all of your local files and puts it into your blob storage on Azure. So that is available right on Azure. And so let's just refresh this. We have homepage, image, and then you have your green screen. What happens is whenever you reference it, say on an HTML file, some sort of output, it's going to go look for it online. But of course, you want to easily manage it in Windows Explorer or whatever you're using. So it just keeps that in sync. Every time you put collect static, it collects all the changes, pushes it online, and makes it available there. And the fact that it is here in the storage browser and it was working on our site is really quite great. So let me just find our site. It is live now. Of course, index is just a hello world, but if I go image, it runs this function and gives us back our green screen. And if we inspect it, you'll find that it is fetching it out of my blob storage. So it's not somehow reaching into my local computer. The last bit is the query view. Okay, I have just created a really simple model. The only thing in that model is a name, which is a character field. And here, what we are doing is every time you run query, we create a new object, a new event object, and it's called Anson. And so this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th time I've created the object. And after I create the object, I just do a filter of all of them and concatenate all their names together and print it out. Like, this is absolutely useless as a function, but it just shows if I refresh again, there should be 9 Ansons. Yeah, and 10. And we can look at the SQL. So, oh, actually, I don't think I have easy access to that. So let's ignore that for now. But basically, it's showing that everything is now running on Azure services. I push it online, and everything is perfect. Now, the next steps is to make much better use of this. Models, we want to create models that make sense, that are more useful than names. We want views that are just more than a hello world type of output. And so we're going to have to start using templates and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that in this video, because that's starting to build a real Django website. But you'll find that this was a difficult couple of hours to go through. I ran into so many problems. But all in all, everything does function together. And now I have this basis, and you guys can watch through this video, probably slow it down and skip through all the times I had to restart and start from scratch. But it's working, and it's going to cost us very little money to run. So over here, we have my subscription fee, and the Django project, the orange, is actually is actually quite low, albeit, it's only ran for 4 or 5 days in comparison to the rest of the files. But basically, I'm still sitting at $0. So if you want to run a website, you want to run a live Django website, this is really cheap. I did this a few years ago on like AWS, and maybe it's I've had a bit more experience. I was talking about Zappa, but it's about $20 a month. And that's because the SQL server is brutal. There's no serverless equivalent. And that's where most of your cost is. Everything else adds up. The functions does cost $1 a month or so, but the SQL is where it's really brutal. And Azure has this serverless, very, very cheap solution for you. I am going to jump back in and put in an actual template so we have something nice and pretty to look at, but I am calling this done. It's using Azure Blob Storage, it's using Azure SQL, and it's using Azure App Service. In total, it should cost maybe $1 or $2, $1 or $2 a month. So very cheap, and it's functional. Hopefully this has been helpful. Again, I'm going to link to that fantastic resource in the description, because I think if I followed that from start to finish, I would have gotten away with a lot less heartache. But I'm quite happy. The last time I tried to do this with AWS, it took about 2 or 3 months trying to debug and trying to get this together. Whereas on Azure, this has taken me, I think so far, about 4 or 5 hours. And in real time, it's been about 5 days in how many days it's taken. So this has been much less painful. And I think this is something that's fairly sustainable. You can upgrade your storage and scale it up. You can upgrade your app service and scale it up. You can upgrade your SQL. So as you grow, you can start basically at $1 or $2 a month. And then as you grow, all of these services are not expensive. When I went online, a lot of people suggested, oh, you should just push it to Heroku. They are very cheap early on, but as you scale, they get very expensive. Azure is not the cheapest, but it is reasonable across the board at the start all the way to the end when you scale to 1 billion users. So you don't have to change too much here. You just flip a switch, it goes from serverless to server. You flip a switch, it just goes up. All right, so let's make this a little prettier on the eyes before we finish. And to wrap things up, we have a site. So I was working on this before. This was a one-page app that I wanted to build to demonstrate some ideas. There's really nothing here. Normally, if you were trying to build something to take advantage of Django, what you would have is here, this context field right here, and you would pass things. So for example, if I were doing this query of all these objects, I would pass them into the context here. And then when you render it, you can start putting curly braces. Well, I think it's actually 2 percentage signs and the ending curly brace, and you might have, say, events. And you would be able to show all of those things in, what am I doing here? That is not right. where's my index? Here we go. So say in the header, I might put these events into it, and I can loop through it. And there's all this cool stuff in Django where you can pass information from the Python side onto the HTML JavaScript side. So it's really cool. Right now, I don't want to get into all of that. I just wanted an index that wasn't hello world. And so I put it into a template here under home page. In template, I have the index file. And in your views, you just render the index with the context. And so if you're really good with HTML and JavaScript, you can just write the code right in here and get it set up. So this is well, still obviously a placeholder site, but not a hello world. It's starting to move together into a lot of pieces. I had this OnePage app to demonstrate a few things. Let me see if I can actually get this working here. And just to show you guys what this is about. Okay, so this site, in theory, is going to run on so many different services that it's going to start looking like a real project. On the front end, it's HTML and JavaScript, and it tries to access an API. The API is built on Azure Functions, and so when I run this and click View, it reaches into Azure API, and that API actually connects to the GitHub API to fetch this document. And if I compare it to another version, let's go alpha, this is happening all on my Azure Function API. This website means it's running just basic JavaScript, Azure API, Azure Functions, and GitHub's API. This website itself is running on Azure App Service. That is what is pushing out this website. And if we do a bit more work where we have logins and people interacting that way, if we have actual images instead of a black box, we'll be interacting also with Azure Storage and Azure SQL. And all of that for very little money. Yeah, so that's it. This is where we're starting to put all of the projects together. This is a personal project that I'm hoping to create. We're not going to finish building this all on screen. This is some sort of a project on my end. But you can start seeing where earlier on, we were building an API and we were building a JavaScript website, and now we're moving into Django and trying to get storage and SQL together. And this site right here just shows you how you can start putting all of those pieces together to really get something quite production based. So hopefully that will get you really excited. Sometimes I feel like these tutorials, they show you little things and people think, oh, well, when am I going to build an isolated API, an isolated piece? But all of these are really simple, but you start piecing them together and you get really complex things. With all of the pieces I mentioned here, I can't imagine very many websites you can't actually build. You have all of the pieces to build the next Twitter, the next Facebook, the next whatever, pretty easily. And all of these tools, if you think about, say, Instagram, they're built on Django. They're building their own APIs in the back. You have the tools here to build something akin to Instagram, at least in its early days. So I hope you guys had fun. This, I can honestly say on my end, was not fun. It was frustrating, but to get through something, there is sometimes some level of frustration along the way. So, yeah, hopefully this will save you guys some time. Again, please do read the link that I put in the description, because I think that tutorial is invaluable. Although it is missing a few pieces, so I think watching this video will help kind of put the missing pieces in there. Um, and hopefully you guys can share whatever projects you're working on right in the comments section, or contact me directly. So thanks.